Who now for Defense Secretary? What now for Eastern? And will the common cold be cured? Well, maybe sooner than we think.
NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. With John Tower's defeat today, the big question is, who's next for Defense Secretary? Who does President Bush nominate now? Lots of speculation tonight, but no announcement. The vote against Tower went about as expected. 53 against, 47 for, 3 Democrats for Tower, 1 Republican against him. It was a historic moment. Only the 9th time in history that a president's cabinet choice has been rejected by the U.S. Senate. NBC's Andrea Mitchell continues her coverage of this long, bitter struggle, which is now over. Andrea?
Tom, it was with a mixture of anger and resignation that John Tower's supporters made their final arguments, knowing nothing they could say would change the outcome.
Mr. Johnston, no. Mrs. Kassebaum, no.
The chamber was unusually somber as Vice President Quayle, who had tried for weeks to rescue the nomination, read the final vote.
The ayes are 47. The nays are 53. The nomination of John Tower to be Secretary of Defense is not confirmed.
After watching the vote on television in his temporary Pentagon office, Tower announced that he will now return to his beloved Texas.
It is time for the bitterness, rancor, and anger to fade. But I depart from this place at peace with myself, knowing that I have given a full measure of devotion to my country.
Nancy Kassebaum, the lone Republican to vote against the nomination, cited Tower's work for defense contractors and his attitude toward women. As the vote neared, Tower's supporters tried to put the Democrats on trial.
We have seen the Senate, the so-called world's most deliberative body, become a pipeline for gossip and smear, a peddler of rumors and leaks.
On the defensive and fighting back, Sam Nunn.
I'm hearing things out here on the floor as if we're having an impeachment trial. Somebody better read the Constitution and understand that this is advice and consent.
Denying partisanship, the majority leader pledged future cooperation with George Bush.
This vote is not and should not be interpreted as a vote to harm the president.
The Democrats may even bend over backwards to avoid appearing partisan in the future. But there's no doubt the Democrats are the clear winners, most notably the new majority leader, George Mitchell, and although he was somewhat bruised in this battle, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Sam Nunn. Tom?
Thank you, Andrea. What do they think at the White House about the damage to this young Bush presidency, John?
Well, it hurts. It hurts a president who is trying to look firm and in control of events. He will not, however, knowing that the Democrats are in full control of Congress, he will not start a name-calling contest that he can't win. What he will do is continue to emphasize bipartisanship, especially in the budget negotiations which began today. One good thing that came out of this is that the White House feels Bob Dole did a good job in a losing fight for John Tower, and that has dissipated much of the bad blood between Dole and George Bush, Tom.
Thank you very much. John Cochran, who's at the White House tonight. And just across the river at the Pentagon, John Tower has been reporting for work every day, but major decisions really have been on hold there. Fred Francis is on duty at the Pentagon tonight. Fred, what's the biggest concern in that building about still another delay in getting a secretary to run the place?
Tom, the Pentagon needs real leadership now on some questions vital to national security. Someone has to decide who's going to cut $6 billion from the defense budget and how to implement purchasing reform around here. The president has to be told by the Pentagon which new strategic missile to build and how far to go on Star Wars. And in the issue of Europe, someone must be told in the changing Soviet relationship whether we should pull troops and equipment. All critical issues, Tom, which will be on hold now for at least another month.
Okay, thanks very much. Fred Francis at the Pentagon. Another crisis, this country's drug problem. Today, President Bush paid tribute to the men and women who are fighting the war on drugs. He went to New York City to the offices of the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, and he was presented with an agency jacket. He recalled how a senior agent was gunned down in New York last week. Bush said the 4 shots that killed Agent Everett Hatcher were heard in Washington and across America. Meanwhile, that John Tower debate in the nation's U.S. Senate chamber had the whole country captivated today, including our commentator, John Chancellor, and he has some thoughts on that tonight. John?
Tom, You know, when you get right down to it, this debate we've just gone through wasn't so much a fight about Tower as it was about power. A fight about the power of the executive branch and the legislative branch. George Bush is known to believe that the Congress has got too big for its britches, that it tries to exercise its power in areas where the president should play a dominant role. So Mr. Bush's support for John Tower really went beyond personal loyalty. He was, in a sense, defending himself and what he sees as the power of his presidency. That's one reason why he stayed in the fight. And of course, when the White House kept the pressure on, the Democrats got their backs up. Their power as the dominant party in the Congress was being challenged. The whole thing became hardball politics right down to the bitter end. Yet it was a curious debate. Sometimes the evidence against Tower didn't seem weighty enough to justify the intensity of his opposition. People were asking, do the senators know something we don't know? Is there some unspeakable problem? I don't think there was. The fight was really about power, but nobody would come out and say that, so they talked about the nominee. And the fight isn't over. We live in an age of divided government, with the presidency usually in Republican hands and the Congress usually in Democratic hands. As long as that goes on, the legislative and executive branches will continue to battle for power, which is commentary for this evening, Tom.
Thank you, John.